So, hello, good morning, everyone. I hope you have started a good day, and welcome to our third discussion in the discussion series, Universal Approaches in Local Circumstances, a series on policy and practice gaps in urban conservation. The series is organized at the BTU and by the cooperation of the Research Training Group, DFG Research Training Group 1930, and the Chair of Urban Management. And our events are funded by the German Research Foundation, DFG. And this morning, I'm very happy to welcome Professor Alslik and Dr. Albadri and Dr. Asadi from Baghdad. And we are all ears to listen to your discussion about the conservation in the city of Baghdad. I mute myself and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Nice to meet you and nice to be here with everybody.
Thank you, Maya.
Good morning, everybody. I am Dr. Fawzia Al-Asadi, moderator of this session. I am lecturer in Baghdad University College of Engineering Department of Architecture. Welcome to a series of discussion on the policy practice gap in urban conservation universal approach in local circumstances. The speakers are first Dr. Ghada Alslik, professor in University of Baghdad College of Engineering Department of Architecture, and the founding member DOCOMOMO-Iraq, a member of a board of trustees of Nahrain Center for Strategies Studies, and a founding member of the Makyia Foundation for the Development of Baghdad. The second speaker is Dr. Mohammed Rahman Albadri, is a lecturer at the Al-Esraa University College, a former general director of Almansour Municipality, the Minor's Office of Baghdad. He has conducted scientific research on legal issue in the city of Baghdad. To start with the dialogue, we will have a fast look at the growth of the city of Baghdad and the main rehabilitation and renewal urban projects. The presentation by Dr. Ghada.
Welcome, everybody. Do you see the presentation in full screen now?
Professor Ghada, no, we see the Zoom page. I think you should select the...
Do you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. So welcome everybody to this dialogue. I will start by a short history of the city of Baghdad, its main historical districts, and then the main conservation projects in its modern time. So this is the city, the modern city of Baghdad. Here is the historic area of the city of Baghdad before the building of the round city in the 7th century AD. And you can see that there were small villages, there was transportation, and the arrows are for the sites of historical Mesopotamian sites. Then Caliph Almansour built his round city as a capital, and soon it grew to become a great metropolitan city, governing half of the known world at that time. I mean, in the 8th and 9th century. So we have the Imam Abi Hanifa, who died in Baghdad, and his cemetery became a historical site. And as he was known as the greatest Imam, Al-A'zam, the area around it became called Al-A'zamiyya. We also have Imam Al-Kadhim and his grandson, Imam Jawad, who died in Baghdad, and they were in a different cemetery. And as it grew, it became known as Al-Kadhimiyya due to the Al-Kadhim Imam. So in this slide, we see that the round city has vanished, and the capital moved to the eastern side of the Tigris River. And here, this city, which was walled later on, became the historic city, which continued to be for 1,200 years later. And the semicircle here denotes the what was called Dar al-Khilafa, the new urban center, with the palaces of all the caliphs. Here we see a sketch or a diagram with all the layers, starting with the cemeteries and the round city, and then the eastern city, and all overlap on a Mesopotamian older site, and the city in its 60s. This is the walled cities in its history in the 17th century. And from all this great metropolis, what was left was only this part on the right side and this part on the left side of the river. Yet, with the other historic parts of Al-Kadhimiyya and Al-A'zamiyya, but with different cities as Baghdad, and then they were united together later on in the modern times. These were the settlement, the historical settlement around the river. And in the beginning of the 20th century, the city started to grow, and the A'zamiyya and Kadhimiyya were added to the city of Baghdad, and we see the new roads coming from the city to the outside of it, mainly done by the British Army at that time. Different buildings were built in the 30s, mainly in A'zamiyya. This is the Royal Cemetery, and we see about A'zamiyya. Here we see the Royal Cemetery, and here we see Imam Abi Hanifa Mosque. And this is the city of Baghdad in the 40s. In the modern city, we can still denote the historical part and the traditional parts, A'zamiyya and Kadhimiyya, Kark and Rusafa of the main cities and the capital on the river. This is the Imam Kadhim in the beginning of the 20th century. And this is the urban fabric of the city of Baghdad in the beginning of the 20th century, inward-looking complex houses, and with inward looking for the main feature, which is the court and the alleys. These are the alleys. Unfortunately, this is the situation of some of the alleys now. In the 1956, the first major master plan for the city of Baghdad was done, and the city started to grow in modern grid iron, as you see here, grid iron planning outside the older traditional city. Yet we can denote the historical sites here on both sides of the river. And we can denote the area of A'zamiyya and Kadhimiyya within the modern city of Baghdad. This is the city of Baghdad in the beginning of the 20th century, and we see the major impact of modernity was to start with cutting this historical fabric with a street, this street, which was called Rashid Street, and then the street grew to become one of the main features of the modern city. We can see the Rashid Street here being cut through the traditional fabric. And we see the British Army in Rashid Street coming after the World War I. And then the street gaining its 30s character. Before the modern character, there was a period of local style in Iraq, which linked modernity with the traditional fabric. And this is the growth of the street. This is the modernity coming out of the street. And the start of its deterioration, starting in the 70s and 80s. But the alleys were in a very good shape. The impact of wars, and mainly the war in 2003, was very bad on the city. And here we can see what happened to Rashid Street. But the main cafes, the main buildings were still alive and have the spirit of what was in it through times. Some uncontrolled interventions because of the lack of controlling on what's happening within these traditional areas. And here we see, I'm showing here the traditional Rusafa, Baghdad, and the traditional Karkh as it was at the beginning of the 20th century, and in the 80s as it was registered as the historic site, the historic center of Baghdad. And a great study was done in the 80s for the preservation and for the projects to start to rehabilitate all this historic center. Unfortunately, it was not implemented because it was in the 80s and in the 90s there was a lot of wars and sanctions, so it was not implemented. In 2009, only the Rashid Street was given as a project for rehabilitation. Rashid Street is this part here, this part only. And the study now took a linear portion of the historical site. The study was, it depended on the previous studies, but it is elevation treatment of the street without the full and deep analysis of the sectors and the typologies of the buildings, and also for the new land uses if it's changed. The result was perspectives like this, linking to both sides with suggesting the street to be for pedestrian and suggesting elements of traditional fabric to be implemented on the whole elevation of the street. And there was all the transactions were made to be as plazas for pedestrians and very typical plazas without any uniqueness. This is the main perspective of this project. But the alleys are different. The alleys are full of life, full of the spirit, the intangible and the less tangible heritage of the whole city and all layers of history. In 2016, the 100th anniversary of the street was celebrated. Unfortunately, nothing was done after this big celebration for the street. It's still deteriorating, and it is left as this till now. Moving to other side of the river, the Karkh district. This is the Karkh district. Unfortunately, also in the 80s, a street, a longitudinal street, has cut this traditional fabric, also in a linear form, but this time not as a commercial street. It was all for residential buildings, high-rise residential buildings, which were very different from the surrounding traditional fabric. After what they found that they did was wrong, they started a study for the whole area and how to integrate it in a renewable way with what has been done. So a study was been done for the alleys of the car, yet this is the situation of the Haifa Street, and these are what is left of the traditional fabric. The study was renewed different times, and here we can see that the alleys, most of the alleys were in a, well, not good shape, but acceptable shape to be rehabilitated. A new design or a new master plan for this area has been put very lately, 2 years ago, but in a very destructive, in my opinion, in a very destructive way, with having more boulevards here and more cuttings for the traditional fabric. And this is what came up of this study, very different, very, well, weird in relationship with the traditional fabric. These are the main areas which I talked about. If we go to the Kadhimiya, where Imam al-Kadhim was buried, it is a main area with people going for religious visits every year or in certain seasons. And it is uniqueness. So if we look at it, the master plan of 1973 tried to open areas around the shrine so that it will be looked at in perspective way, forgetting or not considering the Islamic way of having the surprise or what kind of coming up from the alley to the shrine, and the inside of the shrine there will be the big space. Well, after they destroyed certain buildings, they recognized that that was wrong. So a study was made for the survey of preservation of the typology of buildings here, the old Astrabadi souk and the khans, the ancient marketplaces, and the different residential areas here. This is how it looked like in that time. But there was a new project for filling these open areas with residential and commercial uses to bring back or to encourage the middle class people of this area to come back to it and to revive it by themselves. Unfortunately, this was only partially, by partially, the basement was done only and it was left again. Now the shrine, the Kadhimiya shrine, and in 2009, the Municipality of Baghdad, Amanat Baghdad, decided to offer a competition for the renewal of an area around the shrine. They decided it's about 500 kilometers. So this is the area which I'm talking about, forgetting all about this side of Kadhimiya. And these are the studies of the streets and transportation within the fabric at that time. But the result, this is, I'm showing the winning project. The result was not in, well, not very considerable to the real life of the traditional fabric and the real life of the visions, the angles of vision and what is needed in this very traditional Islamic setting. We can see here that the opening around the shrine was enlarged, and the surrounding area here was destroyed, the traditional fabric, to build multi-story hotels and other functions. These are views from the project, which is very different about the life of Kazmi, which I showed in the beginning. So this project also was not implemented. Another project, but now they learned from the false mistakes of Kazmiya. So for A'zamiya, they decided that the renewal will be for the whole sector. This is here, Abi Hanifa Imam. As there is something I want to say here, as A'zamiya was a main Sunni area and a very religious area for the Sunnis, and Kazmiya a very religious area for the Shia. And because of what happened in the beginning of let's say 2006 and 7, the whole country and the people of both sides went to encourage the re-establishment of the connection again between both areas, not only physically, but also as people used to live, and they lived together for 1,000 years. So the project of Al-A'zamiya was a main project which has the objective of linking A'zamiya and Kazmiya. I'm showing here some of the projects. They all, here we see, we are looking from the river, and this is Imam Abi Hanifa, and we see the link, the bridge, and how it is been treated not only for the bridge, but also for area to complement the area in front of it on the other side of the river. In this project, we see the development of the Corniche here. Well, there was a palace of the president of the old regime, and it was an objective that to integrate it with places for people. And here we see the royal cemetery, which was treated in the boulevard, which was designed for it. And we see here the area of Abi Hanifa. This is the area of Abi Hanifa. The winning project had the idea that as A'zamiya and Kazmiya are here on the sides of the river, and we see the river here throughout the city, why shouldn't we make the river is the linking part? For linking A'zamiya and Kazmiya is the beginning of linking all the sides together throughout the river. So starting from the part which is A'zamiya and Kazmiya to the whole, for the whole city in small projects. So here we see they started linking with the bridge for the cars and other bridge for pedestrian. This is the Kazmiya and this is the A'zamiya, and treating green sustainable area on the river on this side of Kazmiya and on this side of A'zamiya. Here we see other projects also linking both districts with the pedestrians. And here we see some details of how to treat both, not only in a project for this side, but how to treat both sides of the river. And this is the area, detailed area of the Abi Hanifa Mosque. And this is the full picture of linking both sides on the river. And this is the picture of linking the main areas throughout and keeping, rehabilitating the traditional 30s actually here in this district 30s, not very old, 30s typology of residential area. And this is a very brief. I chose only 4 projects, which were the main projects of conservation. Uh, Unfortunately, none of them has been implemented.
Thank you, Dr. for your presentation. We can start discussion, and I will ask you, Dr. Mohammed, about redevelopment and history. As an expert or professional in Amanat Baghdad, can you tell us a brief of the 2007, that's the time about this project?
Yes, in the beginning, good morning, everyone. The project of Rashid Street was given to such an architect with one other project. He was nominated and started to design that project alone. So he divided the side river five stages or 5 phases according to by using the bridges which are crossing from Risafa to Kaf as a zoning, as we saw in the presentation given by Dr. Ghada. For that project, we have the ancient bridges which are crossing the river, separating the area between them. For that reason, he decided to just to make improvement for the areas and squares between squares of the street, and the improvement for embankment across of the river near the river. But the main problem he faced, he did not took the project as a whole. He tried to make just a beautiful areas, a beautiful places at the squares. He did not look at the allays. He did not try to make the fabrics renewal of fabric or rehabilitation for fabrics. For that reason, he faced many problems, such as the ownership of the area. How to deal with that? How to make investment to, for example, how to make the investment? How to make the investor to come and to use his project. And other things, we have the changing of the traditional facilities was done there. Many allays are still residential, with industrial, with commercial facilities, but the main using and the main land use of the area is still residential. So we can, I think we can increasing people to re-live in this area. I think it's better than sending them away and replacing them with the manufacturers of the such as industries, bags and or any other things. But we can use the area for make it more vital, and make it more livable. That reason caused the problem for the. I think it's the main problem of Rashid City.
When we go to Rashid City, we notice the most of building become a storage.
Yes.
How can we realize this situation?
He thought if we change the land use of the street to pedestrian, he can carry the commercial facilities, commercial activities outside the area. But we can use the upper level, upper floors for the residential. That reason, I think, you know, these buildings with 80 years decay with structural conditions. We have this with a poor structural conditions. That means they need to rehabilitation and maintenance to make it easy for them. And without doing that, people will refuse to use them for their families. We need to have a policy how to make it this street pedestrian at the ground floor, but residential for the other floors. Otherwise, we shall face no. We shall face that people will use it just for storages.
Okay. Dr. What is the academic opinion about this project?
From the academic point of view, from the planning point of view, I don't think that we can separate a street from the surroundings. So academically, or as we see, I was consultant also on the municipality. I told them that we should start with the whole, as the study which I showed, the study here of the 80s took the whole area, not only this street to be rehabilitated by working about the change of land use, by working on where are the residentials, how can I encourage people to come back to these residentials, and then to come back to the roots as main features. Here, by taking only linear sides, he cannot take decisions, or not any planner can take decisions for the other areas. They will stay as they are, and whatever happens here will be very separated. Besides, it will not be well studied as a new land use or as a renewed land use for the people. Yet, there is another point here, is that in this study here, in this project, we see the insistence on the cutting bridges. Well, instead of insisting on the cuttings, how can we make this back one area, one complementary area? This is another view. I did not really talk about the details here, but for example, if we come here, we see so many historical buildings. Some are 1,000 years old, and some here belong to the Ottoman era. So this is a very cultural part. Here we see that modernity came here, and with the master plan of the 50s, this was considered the business district center. So there were so many modern banks here. So this area started to be as an area for banks and business. Here we see different buildings and links, very good links to here is a very old church, and here's very old mosque, and with features which were really neglected in this kind of projects. Focusing on this street only, the facades of the street and the squares, which are the result of the cutting bridges with the axis of the street.
Thank you. We move to Al-Karf district development project, talking about hypotheses. Dr. Mohammed, about Shara and hypotheses.
Yes. It was decided at 80s that it's necessary to cut the historical fabric with a wide polymer. in order to, they insisted on making high-rise buildings to not to letting people see the fabric. They thought that the ancient fabric is not a good, it's not a good thing. It must be not seen. For that reason, they decided to have a dense of buildings or high-rise buildings along this street. And during that period, you remember the country was with a good economy, and they changed the ownership of the road. They demolished all the buildings, all the ancient houses, and invited many architects in order to have new designs for the buildings as residential. For
Sorry, is all this building for the same people who was in the fabric?
You mean does the people who were their houses were demolished? Yeah. They lived in the new one? No, never. They were moved away, and we replaced them with another people because it's costly. For that reason, they cannot afford that prices of that flats, and it was a very high tech at that time, with the nuclear weapons basements, assistance. For that reason, the costs were too high for them. They were unable to be able to do that cost. For that reason, we have the project is a real one. It has no relation with the surrounding. High-rise building, 8 stories, and I think 14-story buildings. One group with 2-story buildings, ancient traditional houses. That reason make in the beginning they will be cutting in the wound of the fabric, as the wound of the fabric. This is street, and most of some buildings were not implemented at that time. Where we demolished the houses. We did not build buildings instead of them.
So do you think that this project is successful regarding with the fabric, traditional fabric?
Never. No one can say that. But you know, politically, decision was taken by the political forces. For that, and the municipality at that time implemented what was given to her as orders.
Ghada, what your opinion of academic and intellectual on this project?
Well, as Dr. Mohammed said, there was a street here. There was a street, but a very small access. And I don't know really, maybe sometime from the history in the municipality, we can go to see how the decision was made. You said it was politically made, I know, but who took the planning decision? I don't know really the policy at that time. What is clear, because this is the only project which was implemented, it's clear that we can analyze things. First, the full authority of one side. So the full authority of one side can decide to change the street, can decide to buy all these old buildings. And I think, and you know, that they really paid good deal of money.
Well paid.
Yeah, well paid as for these when they bought these. But there was also a planning decision which was not in the regulations of the whole city. This is the heights, because the city heights was not to reach such heights at that time. So there was exceptions in the decision, in the planning decisions, and there was some kind of insisting on the residential land use of it. It is clearly different than Rashid Street. Rashid Street, when it was cut, it became the heart of the city, the new commercial heart of the city in the 30s and the 50s. And it gained its character at that time. And it was still in link with its alleys, except of course of this new projects which you talked about. Here, the decision is totally different. The decision is to make high-rise building linear high-rise routes. Why? I don't think that this is the right place of it. They can or they could take any suburb, any new suburb, and start such kind of high-rise residential areas in it. But inside this very traditional Gulf districts, that was first, planning-wise, it was not a good decision. Then, also academically, we have to ask how strategies, how the rehabilitation or renewal strategies are being thought of in the city, in the master plans, in the total area of the city, in the total land uses of the city, in the total diversities of typologies and historical parts. First, we have to make these kind of strategies. What do we want this city to be, or at least this historical part of the city to be? Should I take it off? This is one kind of a strategy. We don't, of course, we don't agree with, but this is a strategy. Actually, here we don't see anything, and only we see a decision of planning a street and to be implemented in a very high class structures and also finishes and services. What happened after that? Fawzia will ask us again, I don't know, maybe, but I'm going to talk about something not only in a planning, in a physical planning. What happened is a real social problem. Those people, poor people living in these traditional areas and who came to live in these new buildings were from a very high class, or at least from a very different income class of people. And also because they decided that professors of universities are given the privilege to live there. I don't know why. Of course, we did not get, not us, there were other professors. But culturally, education-wise, and also income-wise, there was a problem. And the problem, socially, it's still a problem. In spite of the planning problem, the land use problem, the morphology problem, the skyline problem of the city, the social problem which was created here. Then there was other things. For example, within these sectors, they were also, like in Rashid Street, they were segmented. And in these segments, they gave the segment to this designer and another segment to another designer. Actually, you can see that there is an overall strategy for the building, but there is no unity. In the new projects itself, there's no unity.
All other architects say that, like you said.
Yeah,
like you.
yes. We are talking about a project which has implemented in the 80s and still in a very good shape. I mean, these buildings are in very good shape, while the areas around it deteriorated in a great deal and still in deteriorating. But there is only one, let's say, good point here. The areas around the traditional fabric around did not change its land use. It is still residential, and people are still living in the traditional fabric. Well, I have to say, in this sector, in this sector, in this sector a little bit, in this sector, of course, you know that in the 90s, there was a project, I'm going to talk about it now. There was a project also by a political decision to build only this area in a low-rise for a certain group of people, which is also criticized, is not a good solution. Why only this part and why only for these people only? Well, if we come here to this area, this is the traditional British embassy. It was a building from the Ottoman era, and as we know from history, when Percy Cox came with the World War I, sorry, and took this building, and when Iraq had its establishment as a new state in 1921, this became an embassy, but it's a very unique in its style and its typology. It's very unique. Well, the British embassy is not here anymore. It is now in the green area, as you know. But the building is here, and also we can say sorrowfully it has been in deterioration, like all other sites here. Well, in this bridge, there was some kind of change of land use in this area, but not here and not here. What is also very lively here is the bank of the river. People are still using the bank of the river for making the
Traditional stuff.
this traditional fishing stuffs. Yes, they still here.
Net?
Nets, yes. And now the nets which are being done here, they're not only for fishing, they became very touristic. They're being used. So in a very lively way and in their own way, the people here are renewing their traditions and they are still living in a very good environment for themselves. What they need some kind of help in the infrastructure and also for the renewable or the reviving of this structure. And everybody here, when we talk to them, they see these buildings as walls, separating them from the street. They see themselves behind these walls. This is the area. How beautiful it is. This is the area which is still living behind these new walls. I'm talking about these areas, and these are being built buildings on Haifa Street. I don't know what to talk more about it. Planning-wise, design-wise, social-wise, economic-wise, which separated people. But the main thing is that before having any new project, any urban renewal or redevelopment project, you have to start from the whole vision as first, the whole vision of the city. And then the strategies to implement these visions, and then to make task plans, and to turn these plans into projects. So you can have the good steps from the whole to the part, and to have the good steps from the overall thought to smaller kinds of projects. This is not done here. It is done exactly the opposite.
I think we have to think how to make this part of the city connecting with the others, not to regard it as a separate part or a village somewhere outside the city. We have to deal with such rules, but we have to make any connection with the other surrounding areas.
Yes, for example, first we have to penetrate between these sectors through Haifa Street. There are openings, and they could be really treated and designed well to link both sides. The second thing, in my own idea, is not to insist on it as a main street in the city. It's used now as a shortcut from here to here. So no, this should be a local street, and should be penetrated here and here. The other thing is, as I mentioned, when we talked about, well, we're going to talk about it in detail now. How should I work with the other side? What happened? I really admire this kind of study. It has been done by JCCF, the Japanese consortium firms, yes, in the 80s. I really admire it. It was a very good study, of course, not implemented, but the thing that you see is they treated only Rusafa. Well, here, as I showed, where some down here are maybe up here. Yeah, this is the center. This is the center of Baghdad. If you go to Baghdad in the beginning of the 20th century, the heart was the river, and all alleys were going straight to the river. The transportation and the commercial life was coming from the river. So the river is the center. Why should I work this side separately and this side separately?
You mean that transportation is parallel to the river, not
well, of course, Rashid Street, we cannot go back to the history. It was done. But why should we insist on streets parallel to the river? Why shouldn't we go to the old routes, which way they were from the river to the gates of the city, from the river to the gates.
Mm-hmm.
So people coming from this side, they used to come to the gate of Alawi. And from Alawi, you know where? From Syria and from Babylon, from Basra, they came to this gate. And then they go through this side to the river. Mm-hmm. And they cross the river by the boats, which were called Gufa, the round boats. And those boats were used commercially as well. Uh-huh. So, and people coming from the east and from the north, they come to this gate, Al-Wastani gate, or come to this gate, the Babsharji gate. Mm-hmm. And they go to the old city and cross to the other side. Mm-hmm. So it is one city with the river as the main constituent, the main life. What happened through time is that streets were cut parallel and they became the life, and buildings gave it their back to the street, to the river. We don't see now in Baghdad, we don't see the river unless we cross a bridge.
You're right.
Yeah, we don't see it. We don't have to live, we don't live it.
We don't feel.
we don't feel its existence only in small portions. So with this kind of study, I think the Japanese did a great work, but this kind of study means that I only took this side, so the others now in Karkh took the other side. Even in both studies, they did not think of what is going on with the other side. So, for example, you see we have the Qishla area with its clock here, and here we have the Khudr al-Yas area. I'm going to say people don't know. It is a very ancient place. It's full of legends. It's full of stories, spirituals. Some link it with St. George, some link it with Imam Khudr, some link it with Zakaria prophet, Yahya prophet. It is full of spiritual and traditional things. And people come here and ask what they want, lit candles, and send them by the river. We have a very good space here with so intangible heritage, very liveful, intangible heritage. In front of it, we see this space of Al-Qishla, which is now very liveful, cultural space. So we have to see these kind of links, something which I developed here to be complemented here and to renew this kind of boat crossing. Why shouldn't I use it anymore? Here, I can have these kind of crossings. I can revive. So I can revive this bank, not as a bank, but as certain places related to other places here.
Doctor, you know, we have a station for boats here beside the Shuhada's bridge.
Does it work?
It's still working.
So you can, for example, you can
Make another one across
not only make another one. No, you can establish a transportation system out of here. And as it is big here, you can also renew this kind of activity.
You know, Doctor, we did not use the river for transportation, for commercial transportation, even transportation.
No, we don't use it anymore.
Carrying carriages or
Except, I remember, except when we had crisis in bridges, in certain dangerous times, we came back to the boats. I remember that very well. But we left that because nobody encouraged that anymore when the bridges went back. So this is, you see, it came silently. It came very, how can I say, spontaneously, and came very, in a very ordinary way of dealing with this kind of transportation. So we can encourage that, in my mind.
By the way, we have two silos on the other, across the, along the river in the at the Karkh bank. Two silos, great silos for grains, for wheat and other.
Yes, well,
but we don't use.
We don't use
the river for the carriages.
For this kind of transportation, commercial.
I think that is a solution for the crowd that Baghdad is suffering from it.
Well, this is another point, because we have such a crowd in transportation. Why don't you use the river? Well, actually, in an area not shown here, we have this problem here in our university. We can use really the river for as another gate for the university, actually. Well, so this is a disaster in my mind. This is a disaster. And dealing with each side of the river is another disaster. In a recent meeting with some people of authority about the revival of historic center, I was asked to give an idea, and I gave the idea of the river as the main component, the river and human, the river and man, because we are not renewing or redeveloping physical entities only. We are redeveloping and renewing the life and the continuity of life. So we have to focus of people and to focus on this feature in the city, besides focusing on the streets and the traditional fabric.
You mean we have to think the river must be a new heart of the city?
Again, a
Again.
heart of the city. Yes. And for these buildings here, for these buildings, we have to encourage that the facades will be on this, not giving their backs. This is not logical. Not practical.
Maybe if the designer make a direct access between the traditional fabric and the river.
Yes, but mainly also by having some kind of a passageway. So people can walk by the river. We only have on Abu Nu'as a small portion.
Doctor, during 1990, we made a passageway between Shuhada Bridge and
You mean
Al-Esraa.
here?
Yes,
You mean here?
yes. It was. I was the designer, and I made it a passageway along the river.
Yes.
But you know what happened next during this the last 30 years?
Was it implemented?
Yes, it was implemented, but nowadays you cannot walk on that passage. Never, because many people and gangs. It was
Yes,
unsafe.
of course. But I'm not talking about the restoration. I'm talking about how to be reviewed, how to bring life again to it. So when you bring people to walk on it, there will be an increase of these people using it for bad things, right?
Yeah.
It's a defensible space.
But you know, during the 90s, I especially I used to walk through that path. It's about 1 kilometer. But
we need a
a
strategy.
few days ago, I tried to walk about. I have got a train.
Yeah. So we need a strategy, a vision to how to deal with the river, to how to deal with the banks, how to revive the traditional transportation and the spaces, the nodes of spaces on both sides, so there will be life again on the river.
But what about having a new approaches, or how can, for example, how can people reach the river? We need
Well, we have now, as you know, everybody knows that the river is not as wide as it looks here. We have certain areas which have been dried from the river. So these areas are very good areas to start with, to have these facilities with. I know that there is some kind of legal thing between the Ministry of Municipalities or the Amanat Baghdad and the Ministry of Water Resources, because they own it, but we can come compromise between this. Okay.
Can I ask you, assume a question?
Yeah.
If the people, the origin people that live in Al-Karf district, they have an opportunity and they live in this high-rise building, can they adapt it to life in this style of building?
Well, we have some kind of academic research. We have some case studies studied by our students, and they made a lot of questionnaire for those people. No, they refuse. We don't like it. They refuse. They refuse to go to the apartments. They want to stay in these buildings, their own, and they have some kind of intimacy for these places. And a rejection, a total rejection for these, not only for the high-rise housing in this area, but for the whole high-rise housing which are being built now in other sectors, even the suburbs. But because of the lack of residents, they go as a second option. The first option is my house on the ground. This is, well, we're going to talk about another problem. This is why our houses, which were planned in the 50s and 60s with 400 or 500 or 700 square meters, very big, villas styles. What's happening to them? They are being divided to 6 parts or 5 parts or in some certain times to 50 square. Why? In our questionnaire, people say we want a place on the ground. This is the typology of Baghdad. This is the culture. It's a culture. And in this kind of culture, we shouldn't go against it. We can.
You have to be.
We can have low-rise, compact housing. Like the city of Baghdad is a very horizontal. Why not? Why not? Why should I change it? It's a culture. And the people would like to live in houses. Why not? I can go to suburbs. I can go to satellite cities. I can solve the problems in certain ways, except nearly not in this way. Nearly, but as a buildings, they are successful till now, but not for the people.
Because it's successful because
it's being
infrastructure.
The infrastructure and the structure itself and the finishes and the high class, whatever finishes they are. This is why they're still on, but not as a good housing solution.
I think the subject of the privacy for this proposal.
It's not only the subject of privacy, yeah, maybe, but also the kind of social relationship between people and their neighbors, and the gatherings. You know, the extended families, they live one beside one. They have they like to stay all together with relatives, with a certain kind of neighborhoods. But in the flats, you don't know who is living next to you, who is living in front of you. This is not. This is why I say you have to understand the culture. You have to understand the society. It is like a deep surgical operation that you have to take each part with a very delicacy. Yes.
Okay. But
there is a good example I can give you. Unfortunately, it's a bad example, but it gives us a lot of lessons. It is the city of Mosul, which the whole traditional area was badly bombed. What we, out of studies of Mosul, which I read and which some of my students did, you can see that 54% of the houses were totally demolished. 30% of the houses were severely damaged, and small portions were partially damaged. These portions, we can add this here on the typology of the damage and the situation of these buildings in this Gulf area or all the historical area. So we can have 3 types or 4 types. Some of them, which are in a very good shape, and I have pictures of them in very good shape, I maintain them. I can give them structural support. Some of them, I can maintain, for example, the facades and change inside for the houses, but keep the planning or the urban design typology of the streets, of the alleys. Some of them, I can change them into new simple projects, but within the spirit, of the old traditional. Is not, my idea is not I have to deal with every single house and to keep it as it is. We can have certain alternatives with them. In certain study, we saw that there were buildings which were demolished, but you know these wooden posts, the great wooden posts with their capital and some kind of the windows are left away. So you can make a bank of the elements. And when you have certain new projects, maybe you can use some of these.
But by the way, Aman, for that Municipality of Baghdad had a bank of the traditional elements.
I don't know.
No. At Babi Sheikh, there is a building, conservative building. We have columns, we have windows, we have dimensional shields.
Okay, this is a good point, but are you using them?
No, but no one.
They will better right by themselves.
I think that would take us to, I have to ask you. You know, most of the buildings were residential, were houses.
Yeah.
But it was compatible with the living style, with the living needs at that time.
Yes.
With courtyard. No family, as I think, can live these days with
the opening
courtyard. Just a minute. That's the first thing. Do you think any household can live, or any family can live in a traditional house these days? For example, no car parking, no sheds, solar sheds, you don't have any shade to be away from the sun during the summer. This one. Other thing, I think we need to have such a way of changing the use of the house to another, for example, gallery for artists, or for example, a small market, but with ancient traditional house.
Okay. Okay. You have two questions, and I'm going to answer. First, no, not in this situation yet. In Gulf area here, people are still using their houses. Some of them has a very primitive way of preventing the sun, etc. But this could be improved. There are ways to deal with the openings, yet keeping the openings, because in summertime they prefer to go out. All of us prefer to go out. And these buildings, as you know, they are very good designed as a weather side. You know, the area of the court has the sun, so the air gets hot and moves up.
Yeah.
While the alleys, they are all shaded, so there is no sun. The air is not in that, yes, it's not in the same temperature. So when the air goes up here, the air penetrates through the house and there is some kind of a circulation. When you go in these alleys and in these houses, you're about 10 temperature less than your house today in our severe hot summer. So this is a good way to make it better with some kind of shadings areas and some kind, you can add to it. You can add certain rooms to it, or you can take off. I'm not saying that this is a very, holy
Holy,
thing,
holy,
holy thing
holy
to,
thing,
to prevent it or to preserve it. But it is a lifeful. It took some changes. It's not changes, transformations through time. So we can have certain transformations with self-regulating overall typology. It's a good way. It's an architectural study. It's an architectural design thinking, and not only adding what we think they are not suitable for living now, so we have to change them. No, we can go to improve the way of their real activity, working weather-wise and structural-wise.
Question, and then I will I will quickly ask I had several questions, but because now Zaido has also raised hand, I quickly ask about two of them. The first one is a very general question of what were the main reasons that caused the development plans or the conservation plans not being implemented. This is the first question. The second question is that is about the alleys that first you said that they are full of life and they are still residential, but then you talked about storage spaces in them, and so why usually the storage spaces around like a commercial center tend to support that commercial or financial hub or the core, like a bazaar, a souk. And when its function gets it turns into a secondary commercial function, then it uses the houses and buildings around it as supplementary spaces to facilitate the workshops, the storage that the souk needs. We have this problem in many cities in Iran. I wanted to hear a little bit more about this phenomenon in Baghdad. There were more questions, but yeah, it was very interesting, particularly the first phase of your presentation. I really enjoyed. Thank you.
Well, I am going to answer first and leave more answers for Dr. Mohammed. When we talked about the storage areas, we talked about it here in Rashid Street. So this Rashid Street was cut and changed its previous residential land use into commercial, but through time, you can see I'm showing here, this is the development of Rashid. It was cut first by the Ottoman, and the British continued it. And then in the 30s, it was very lively with certain administrative buildings and also some cafes, cinemas, and hotels. So it was, the land use of it was transformed from residential to other land uses. This was a cinema, but it's neglected now. And with modernity, there was also certain administrative buildings and banks here. What happened is this kind of activity, the cinemas and the hotels went off here. Certain administrative uses also stopped being here. Only certain commercial on the ground level was kept here. So in this way, the upper floors turned into storages to these commercial stores in here. This is the situation in Rashid Street. It's not the same like in here in Kar. As I said, these areas are still residential. There's no change in land use of it. There's no storages upstairs. No, they're totally buildings with residences. Of course, only few khans, like the old souks, are still here. The khans has changed the land use of old khan to new khan or a total new storage space. Is there any other question?
And so why the several plans were not implemented?
Were not implemented. This is a very good question. Well, the one which was implemented, this one, because we had, what do you call it, a regime, a dictatorship regime before. So there was one decision and one legal thing and one authority. So when the decision was made, everything could be implemented according. There was a good economic at the same time. But for the others, for all the others here, for example, this project or the other, first, there was no strategy. How to deal with the ownerships, how to deal with the implementation, and who will implement and in which way. So in Rashid Street, we have private buildings, we have governmental buildings, we have religious related waqf buildings, and we have other buildings which nobody can touch, which is called the frozen ownerships, which mainly belong to the Jews of Iraq who left the place. So how to deal with these different ownerships? There was no thinking. This is why I said there's no strategy. And how to build it? Here in Haifa Street, the government bought all the residential area, and they did one big project with I don't know, millions of dollars. And now there is also the economic situation, and in such big projects we have to deal in, how do you say, stages, having vision, having stages, and having what part should be for investment, what part the government would do, what part would I leave for the people themselves to work out in complementary with the bigger projects. This is my own idea. How about you?
No, but not more. But how, for example, who will pay for repairing the building? The owner. Most of the owners are not unknown. Most of them are unknown. We don't know them. How can we force them to repairing their, for example, repairing the elevation? That's one of the. How can we pay making the project as facing the project, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3? How can we? There, most of the projects did not give us the policy to implement the project.
Excuse me, doctor. I would say that not the project would give you the policy. There is no policy from the people, from the client. The city, the municipality should have a policy, and the policy should be compatible with the investment ministry, with the other housing ministry. They should have a vision, as I said, and a strategy, and they should have an economic vision, like all other projects, how to build and who will build. New methodologies focus on people. You build a pilot project, you give regulations, this way you encourage the people to develop their houses, and maybe you can give them some economic aid so they can work good. Okay, you have, I think it's a legal way. It's a political and legal problem.
Thank you. So Zaido, yeah. Zaido, could you turn on your mic? Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
First of all, thank you very much for such an interesting presentation. I can draw so many comparisons with what's happening in Baghdad and the reconstruction with Aleppo, my city where I did my project about. So I have actually a few questions that the presentation didn't touch and I was just curious about. So first of all, you are talking about the old city, which is the open courtyard houses, and then you talk again about the buildings from the 30s, modernism. And I mean, if I compare to Aleppo, to Cairo, to other cities, there's always neighborhoods from the late Ottoman period. I mean, I'm talking 1880s, for example, that you see this European influence style, what we call historicist style. So something inspired from Baroque, Gothic. Is there neighborhoods like this in Baghdad, and are they considered historic neighborhoods or protected by authorities or always taken into consideration? Because these neighborhoods are usually always destroyed because they're considered not old or not historic. Second question from what I see, and this is very similar to Aleppo, Beirut, other city, is that is there an adequate survey for the city of Baghdad? Because what I can see is maybe plans from the 80s perhaps, and there's no definition what's inside the plot. So is this still an open courtyard house? Is this now a new building with 3 floors or 4 floors? Is there any adequate survey or adequate map for Baghdad? Because I mean, obviously we are seeing some maps that go back to the 80s, and the way it was done in Aleppo is that they get the map, draw over it with AutoCAD, and try to draw the new street. So you never have any proper maps or proper documentation. And this also affects the decision making when you don't have information and you start focusing on street and squares, but not on the fabric itself. And the last thing you mentioned also about people living in the courtyard houses. So can you please qualify this? Was there a lot of, like the situation also in Aleppo, was there a lot of courtyard houses that were big houses that were divided to smaller units? If this is clear what I mean.
Yes, this is clear.
Yeah, and thank you very much. I think this is, I have so many other questions, but those are the main ones. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, well, I will go back to the map of the city of Baghdad to show you what you were asking for. For example, this in this map we see the main historical. Well, I need to show this map first. From the historical legendary city of Baghdad, what was left and lived for 1,000 years is this center, Rusafa and Kaf, and Adamiya and Kazmiya. Everything else was agriculture here. Okay, so in the beginning of the 20th century, this is what we see. This is what we see. But you can see the stars in the 30s is the Royal Cemetery. In these areas, so this is the historical part, but in this area, and this area, which I call, or maybe the study of the Japanese called the inner city, not the historic. They were all built in the styles which you mentioned, the influences of Baroque and Art Nouveau and some kind of influences similar to Aleppo and Beirut and Cairo. So these districts, are they protected? Well, actually, no, but certain houses here in Waziria, this Waziria is a very nice place of this kind of style. And Saadoun here, very nice place. What's protected is Batawin area, which actually is deteriorating. Also, Karadat Mariam here, Salhia is a very nice area. Then came the modernity. So here, of course, first Baghdad is the living, as I said, the living part of it is the river. So it was logically that it would spread along the river. So this is historical with open courtyard. And these are the mixed styles between the historical Iraqi and the new British and Baroque and Art Deco styles, but with a very good, I did not show here, maybe here with this building, I can show you this building on the Rashid Street. You can see the Doric and some Ionic columns, and you can see some traditional features here, but in other buildings, you can see some Art Deco and Art Nouveau also elements. As I said, these districts are not considered historical. This is why we are losing a lot of these buildings, but there was a study on Adamiyya which documented these houses. Unfortunately, and about the documentation, the real documentation started in the 80s, and it was a good documentation. There was great lists, and each year and year by year, these lists decreases and decreases and decreases because more buildings are being demolished. Yes, we have good documentation, and you have them in the municipality, and you have the documentation done by John Warren in the 80s for Kadumiyya, and our University of Baghdad study of Adamiyya in the 90s. You have in the 1993 the documentation of Rusafa based on the Japanese documentation, but unfortunately we are losing because there is no real, we had a lot of wars and a lot of sanctions and different social and violence situation. The last part was to take care of were the buildings, actually.
I think that a great amount of styles you can see through the Rashid Street. I think because the rapid development, between 1920 till 1970, all the street of Rashid, almost it was built.
Yes,
so
it got this
50
character.
Years, 50 years.
Yeah, it got this character. But this character was not the 30s character. Mm-hmm. It was implemented here in the 30s. And I have my own idea of why. Well, we were under the British mandate. Mm-hmm. The British were not the revolutionary people in design. They were very conservative. So we did not get the earlier modernity. We got the historical, either British, neoclassical, or the some of the French, styles here. But modernity in the 50s, no, it was total modern. Yes. So this is another stage.
But you just on the street, it's about more than 3 kilometers.
It has 3 kind of stage, four.
You can see many styles because the people of Baghdad went outside the country and were influenced with the other cultures. So they came back to Baghdad and built into the new styles.
No, not only this, because modernity was the main issue in the kingdom, in the kingdom period in the 50s, and it was clear, and they had good plans. They had the development board with large scale, and they had good strategy, but this was only for a limited period of time. The third question about if the The courtyard buildings are separated? No, they are not separated. But certain buildings are used for individual rentings. I saw them. You go to the courtyard and you see the houses, the rooms are rented for, let's say, workers who coming from other city and etc. But they are not split. They are kept as good entity. Is this enough? I don't know.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just one note from my own study, maybe just to compare, because all of these neighborhoods with the wide streets and the design, they are seen in most of the Ottoman cities in the 1880s when there's a municipality and the Tanzimat was taking place in the Ottoman Empire. And there was actually a rule to widen the street because in Istanbul, for example, the houses were built from wood and they were eating away the city. So the rule was implemented first for fires. And when the Ottomans created the municipalities in around the 1880s and made it mandatory in all of the cities, many cities had to implement these regulations from Istanbul. And this historicist style in Arabic, they translated to Tarikhaniye, like you mentioned, and there's no clear stage where you jump from historicism to modernism. But this is way, because in Syria, we also had the French mandate, and a lot of researchers think that this style is because of the French, but it's actually preceded the French this was 50 years before the World War I. And I think this is also the case, maybe the case in Baghdad, but I don't know, you are the experts.
No, actually, no. Well, the Ottoman built certain buildings in the 1850s and 70s, but they were all by engineers and architects brought from Italy and also German in the latest time. The first street to be opened in Baghdad was in 1908 by Khalil Pasha, who was the governor, the Ottoman governor. It was this Rashid Street. It was called Khalil Pasha Jadasi, only part of it. So there was no previous. The previous stage in Iraq was being, well, we don't know exactly the designers, but with certain studies, with linking the designs with buildings in Milan and Venice, we could conclude, and also we found certain pictures with Italian engineers working, so we could conclude these kind of influences, but not real history or documentation.
Thank you very much for again for all of your answers. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, it could go on, and yeah, we would listen for one more hour, maybe, really, because the topic was very interesting and very relevant to the whole series. And unfortunately, we have to close the session in order to start organizing the next session that starts in like 15 minutes. So yes, I would like to thank you again for this very interesting discussion and very detailed information that you shared with us. And yes, and hope to see you in other events here or in other places. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. It was nice. Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone. So in 15 minutes, we will start, maybe a little bit later, we will start the next session. Thank you, everyone, and bye for now. Bye.
Okay.